welcome to the Teaching Together podcast, where we celebrate and share the glows and grows of teacher life. I'm Sierra.
And I'm Grace.
Well, we do really love to hear about each other's glows and grows and what's been happening in our teacher lives at the moment. And since following our new episode format, this is one of our full-length episodes. I am very excited to hear, Grace, what has been your glow or grow from this term so far?
I'm very excited to share a glow. I feel like most of them are glows. Maybe I'm not reflective enough on my teaching practice, but I received the email that all teachers hope to receive at least once in their career. Hopefully more would be great. But I received a totally unprompted email from a parent of a student with significant learning needs and all that sort of stuff. And the parent was just saying that they were very, very thankful that their child is confident and happy and really looking forward to coming to school, and like actively saying like, I can't wait to go to school, which of course just made me want to weep at my desk, because like that's all we want as teachers is for like all our students to be happy to be at school. And this particular student is also just a sweetheart, just a gorgeous little human. And even better, this parent CC'd my principal in, so he also knows how amazing of a teacher I am. But yeah, just reading that email, it's just like, this is so amazing. Oh my goodness. And this parent is also a teacher. So they clearly understand how helpful and like inspiring and validating that kind of email can be. And yeah, so I just feel really chuffed and validated as a professional, and really glad that my efforts to, care for this student and their family have been received well.
Yeah.
And are having a positive impact. So I just, feel very professionally validated at the moment, which is just beautiful. And I'm glad it happened today on the day that we're recording in real time, so I could share with everybody how amazing I am. But yeah, it's just, I feel like I am glowing. It's just fantastic. Sierra, glow or grow from you?
Oh, I do have a glow. I'm actually very excited to share with you. So if you've been listening to our last few episodes, you'll know that we've been talking about routines. And I have tried to take a lesson from the Kindy Teacher Grace playbook, as I have been establishing my routines with my Year 7 classes this year. I'm sort of like, I'm treating them as my guinea pigs, really. I'm not implementing all of these routines across all of my classes, but I want to see if this works with them, and then they can carry it forward and, so on and so forth. But I have been trying some very explicit, like, start of lesson and end of lesson routines. And I know that I was sharing the other week that my sort of folio 5 routine, which was, an endeavor to try and keep them spending just 5 minutes at the start of each lesson up to date and kind of keeping their production records and keeping track of their time management, just kind of never really succeeded. And I mentioned kind of on the fly, I had this idea that maybe I should just get them to handwrite these kind of little really quick blurb things that can be translated to their folios later. So I've been trying this for the last week or so. And I've just come up with a few different sentence stems, where it's just like, put the date at the top of your page. Then the sentence stem I wrote on the board was something like, last lesson I ... and they have to write what they did last lesson. And then this lesson I plan to ... and then here are 2 things that I will take a photo of this lesson, and make a little checkbox next to it, because often for their portfolios, they have to have photos and they always forget to take their photos, and then they try and do them at the end, and then they look really dodge and blah, blah, blah. So just simply that act, and that really has been sort of sticking within that 5-minute limit. Maybe a little bit over at the moment because I'm sort of teaching them my expectations, but they come in, they get their book out, they get their pen, they write the date, they answer the 3 sort of sentence stems, and then they show me, and then they can get their stuff out of the cupboard. And that has been working really well. And it's also addressing some of the like bottlenecking that happens in the room when they all try and get their project work out at the same time and blah, 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 because as they finish, then they're coming to sort of almost get their entry ticket to be able to do their next thing. And And you know how you always say that the little kids remind you when you've like forgotten the next step in your routine?
Yes.
So I spent such an effort like saying you're going to do this and then you're going to do this and then you're going to do this. And I wrote all the things on the board and whatever. And then the next lesson as they came in, I pulled aside some of the like very attentive girls and I was like, girls, what was the last sentence stem? Like, I can't quite remember what I wrote. And they told me straight away and I was like, perfect, thank you. And then I wrote it all on the board. But yes, like they were, I guess, reminding me. And yeah, anyway, it's just been really good. And even with some of my year 7s, I tried actually, and this was one thing we spoke about the last couple of weeks, is like trying a routine, teaching a routine, investing some time in it, and then kind of realizing that it falls flat and it's kind of like, oh, a bit awkward. What do you do with that? I was trying to be very structured with how they get their work out of the cupboards. So that it is, I guess, a bit smoother and easier. And then after like 1 or 2 lessons of trying that, I was like, actually, this is not working. Like this is way too slow. This is like the opposite end of the spectrum. So now I've just got the first 2 students who finished their entry ticket thing, go and get all the work out of the cupboard and start distributing it to everyone while everyone else is still writing. Anyway, just a few little tweaks as we go. And that's okay because I just say to them, that's okay. We're just tweaking as we go. It's all right. But yeah, anyway, it has made such a difference. And I created a little handy helpers chart. Like I'm really channeling my Indian primary teacher at the moment.
That's fantastic.
Created a little handy helpers chart so that literally every student in my class has a designated pack up job.
Love it.
Rather than just, okay, everyone, it's time to pack up. These are the things that need to be done. And our cleanup is going so well and our room is in the best state it's been for a while. And I'm really grateful.
I love that. Wow, my voice. I am recovering from, recovering. I've been well for like 2 weeks now, but recovering from a cold. But that is so awesome that you're like being so intentional about these routines. And they're actually working.
Yes.
Like, I love that whole, the sentence stems with the today, and I'm going to take 2 pictures of these things.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing. Like, I love a good sentence stem, I have to say.
Do you know what else I did? I also got them to try preempting 2 problems I will face today.
Ooh.
And that has been really interesting too, because I'm like, as you're doing this thing that we're all going to be doing, like cutting out your pieces or whatever, what are 2 problems that you think you might face? And then they write them down and they write the solution down to the problem so that when they do face the problem, like, you know, they've cut it wonky or whatever they've done, I don't have to answer the questions 23 times about what they should do to solve that problem. Like they've already preempted a solution to that likely problem and I'm trying to boost their problem solving thinking in that way.
Wow. I love that.
It actually has been going so well.
Wow. That's, as I would say in my class, gold star for you. Love your work.
Thank you.
That is fantastic. And that is because of our podcast.
Literally. Sometimes when I think about the different people out there who might be listening to us, thank you for bothering to like jump on board and hear what we have to say. But this whole process of doing this has been, I think, just as helpful for myself and hopefully for you as we hope it to be for other people.
Yeah.
Like just the time to sit and think through how could we be being better teachers.
And reflection, constant reflection is how you get better at anything.
Literally.
I love that. And I feel I do, look, everyone knows I'm biased and I love you, but I do feel inspired by your level of constant reflection and the fact that you actually put things into practice, because I still sometimes feel like I'm doing doggy paddle or just barely treading water.
Oh, I've been feeling like that for a long time.
Yeah.
But we try.
You know. We
have
actually
bursts of energy.
We do. And bursts of clarity and moments where we go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm maybe slightly ahead. And then, you know, I just usually feel like I'm on a treadmill and it's slowly getting faster and faster and people are throwing things at me that I'm expected to catch, but they don't know that I have 0 athletic ability while also trying to juggle stuff. And it's just all a big thing. Which, honestly, is a great segue into what we're going to be talking about today, which is reinventing the wheel and the fact that you shouldn't be doing that for every single lesson ever, because that is unsustainable. And part of making teaching sustainable is having a structure or structures or routines or lesson types or activity types that work and that you use over and over and over again. But before we even get to that, it's time for tea.
Grace, what are you drinking today?
It will surprise 0 people to hear that I'm drinking French Earl Grey, which is the peak of all teas. However, it might surprise you to know that in my real life, I haven't had a French Earl Grey for quite some time because
That is surprising.
I've taken to work just some Twinings jasmine and green tea, which I quite like. It's quite it's just a boring green tea, but I like having that during the day. Sierra, what are you drinking?
I'm having a licorice tea, which I know is not...
I just made a sad face.
Yeah, she's not impressed. But yeah, nothing was really speaking to me from my tea drawer tonight. But I do like this tea. It's a little bit sweet, but it's not like fruit sweet. Yeah. Anyway, it's just chill.
You do you.
Yeah, thanks. I will.
You have my permission. Okay. So let's jump in. Now that we've had our tea and we're feeling refreshed with our beverages of choice, we thought we would actually start by thinking about how we planned lessons when we were on placement, because that is the classic over-planning kind of situation, which we're trying to avoid, and we'll get to how to avoid that later. But we thought we'd start, at the start. Yeah, at the very beginning is a very good place to start.
Indeed. Thank you, Julie Andrews.
Yes, thank you. The Queen. The one true Queen forever. And I mean, we need to acknowledge that when you're on placement, you're at university, which means that the lesson plans you are required to submit are so much more detailed than any lesson you will ever submit or just use in your life ever as a real teacher, which is quite frustrating. But look, we understand why you're being assessed.
And it does help you to think through the different components of what a lesson should maybe entail.
Yes.
Even if you don't, in the real world, have it written down.
Yeah. You don't need to articulate every single thought that's going through your brain in your real teacher job, which is fantastic. But it does mean that potentially you're walking into your very own classroom with this idea that your plans should be 8 pages with lots of scripts, and there's a brand new structure every lesson, and all your differentiation is a whole page on its own. And you're planning one lesson in isolation. And it's this beautiful snapshot that has no context and is completely unsustainable because you spent 4 hours cutting and laminating resources for it that you never use again.
It's not that those lesson plans are bad. Our uni days, placement days, lessons that we spent, maybe a whole week preparing a 1 or 2 lesson sequence to show your placement supervisor. They might have been fantastic. They might have been really well-rounded. I know that I remember doing things where I had all these different color codes in my lessons, representing different types of pedagogical things that I was trying to incorporate. And that might be great, but it's once you have an actual full-time load, there's just no way that you can be dedicating that amount of time to lesson documentation and reinventing the wheel every time. Now, I say this as a chronic reinventing the wheeler, but I think everybody knows that you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. And I think one of the challenges for that as teachers, which I just feel is really important to mention at the start, is that teaching is so closely linked to your own personality, I think, and your own interests. And the way that you run your classroom is very specific to you as an individual, I think. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why it's really hard to not reinvent the wheel sometimes, because maybe you're in a super collaborative team and that's great, and they can design things that you can use and you can design things that they can use, and that's fine. But I think for a lot of us, a lot of the time, what exists is not the way that you would do it, or it's not the way that you gel with, or, and I just think there has to be a balance between, I guess, reinventing the wheel in a way that works for you and your teacher personality, and your kids. Ultimately, your students are the ones who you are thinking about as you're planning. And I think that's part of why, that's also another contributing factor to why we reinvent the wheel, because not every class is the same. And so the way that you've taught something in the past may not necessarily be exactly the best approach for you to teach it in a subsequent year. But we do need to look for ways to not be constantly reinventing the wheel, and how we can have systems, and I guess piggybacking off our last month of episodes, routines that actually support us to still teach in a way that's enjoyable for us and aligns with our teacher identity, without the expectation of writing 8-page long lesson plans that take 4 hours per lesson, because there is not enough time in the world for that.
Absolutely not. I think that is such a helpful point that you just raised, because I often will be scrolling Teachers Pay Teachers or Top Teacher or TeachStar or whichever is your subscription of choice. And I'll go, I like the idea of this resource, but I hate the way it's formatted, because whoever formatted this did it 17 years ago. And now it looks disgusting, and I cannot possibly have my children use that for one lesson. And I need to let go of that. But, we labored on this extensively in last month's topic. But when you're a full-time teacher, there's so many other things that require your time and your mental energies, like reports and just general admin and meetings and going on camps, and the emotional labor of having students that you actually spend enough time with to connect with. And it's wild. So the way that we plan to teach during placement, well, it's just not reflective of reality. And I understand to an extent why it's built that way, but it's not sustainable. And it's not built for a full teacher load. And I think I found it, and am still finding it, hard to transition away from that, because I think I'm just trying to prove that I'm a good teacher. And go, I need to have a super detailed lesson. I also get stressed that what if they finish really early and I've got nothing to do, because I know myself and I'm very bad at improvisation. Very bad. And my wonderful intern, Talia, hello, Talia, I'm going to make you listen to this episode as well. She has been she's been at my school for a total of 10 days, spread out across 5 weeks. And I was out in the art space just because I forgot my laptop, had to run out and get it. And to keep the class quiet, she had just on her own just come up with she just decided to do the guess the number I'm thinking of game. And I was so impressed, because as a teacher on placement, I would never have done that. And I would never have thought to do that. And I would have just panicked. And even as a full-time teacher now, I would have just panicked. So that was great. Go Talia.
Go Talia.
Yeah. And I think also when I was a new teacher, I lie, I'm still a new teacher. When I was a newer teacher, I loved scrolling Instagram and going, oh, that looks amazing. Oh, that looks amazing. That looks amazing. Now I need to spend 17 hours today making sure that I do everything that they've done. And that is just unhelpful.
I would love to say something on that topic.
Please.
Canva is one of my most used, I guess, teacher tools. I mean, I know it's not just a teacher tool, but I use it so frequently. And I think as we're teaching, and certainly for me, because I feel like I'm teaching across so many different subjects and things, but I mean, the same as in primary school. I guess you're doing different things, even though it's with the same year group or the same group of kids, different subjects. I have not really been a booklets kind of person in the past. And because I'm in a high school setting where most students work on their laptops, I tend to set most work digitally through Google Docs or templates and things like that for them to use. And Canva templates are great. But one thing I have found really helpful is that a couple years ago, I had the time to put together a paper sort of workbook for the whole term for my D&T class. And that has been such a helpful resource. And I would really like to actually do some similar things with some of my other classes. But I don't have time to sit and spend 17 hours making something look pretty, because I'm not about to print off like a class set of booklets that have been designed in Google Docs. Not about that. I'm literally a design teacher. It has to look nice. But one thing I just keep saying to myself is, okay, I know that I'm coming up with lessons for this topic like bit by bit, but once I've finished all the lessons for this topic, what I should do is go back and collate them into a booklet, and then next year I've got the booklet. You know,
oh my gosh.
like, rather than feeling like I have to spend 17 hours making a beautiful booklet like right now because I've just seen a great idea. Like, it's okay. Take a deep breath. You will be a teacher next year as well, hopefully, and you will have a chance to like refine it then. It's okay for us to not have, you know, the full scope of every single thing planned that far in advance, because things take twists and turns and change. And yeah.
Wow. That blew my mind.
Stop. It was not that exciting.
No, that's blown my mind. Just the simple practicality of, well, I'm going to teach this unit next year. Let's just slowly make the things now and then print them as a booklet. That just makes sense. See, I'm not a very practical thinker. And well done. Gold star to you.
I think the other thing is for today, like, I hate setting textbook lessons. Like, that's just so not my personality.
So boring.
But one thing I did actually try literally today in real time was I created a small handout of 5 pages to give to my year 12s to facilitate them. They were like using the textbook, but not just read the textbook and answer the questions on page 317. It was like, read this content, translate parts of it to this handout that I've given you. And then there was like additional kind of more critical thinking that I was trying to get them to draw out of the textbook rather than just read the information. And I said, this is actually going to be independent learning while I meet with each of you one-on-one to have like a planning session about your major project.
Ooh.
And I think that was actually a really handy way for me to be able to incorporate a little bit more theory into my lessons while also doing something that suits me and my personality a little bit more. I really like workshopping ideas with students. And I think I'm actually going to try and build this into my routine with year 12.
I love it. So we have very specific teaching styles. I don't use slides. Even though I would love to, but they just take too long for me to put together. And I'd actually rather spend that time doing other planning tasks. So I don't use slides at all. Do you do slides?
Rarely. If I do, it's probably either one, because I'm reusing a resource that somebody else has actually made. So a slide deck that another teacher has made. And I'm just kind of like, look, I need to get this information across. I'm just going to use this. That's me channeling my trying not to reinvent the wheel for everything kind of personality. If I do use slides, I really like to integrate them into Wayground so that there's an interactive element.
Yes.
So you can just like import your slides file or your slides as a PDF straight into Wayground and then like scatter it with multiple choice questions or short answers or like word clouds and other things that you want the students to like answer. And again, that works for me because they've all got laptops in front of them. So I can literally get them to like join this lesson. And as I work through the slides, then a question will pop up on their screen for them to answer. And so I find if I'm going to use slides and do a very sort of structured lesson like that, it's almost always interactive.
Yes. And it's so frustrating. I cannot remember for the life of me what the website was called. But when I did my high school placement, I used a similar website to Wayground that Mentimeter.
Oh, I love Menti.
Loved it. And it
Yes.
was a hit with my students.
Yes.
I used it in the lesson that I was observed in from a rep from the uni, and he thought it was great. But yeah, that one's fantastic. And it's not, I mean, it's not so much interactive slides. It's more like you can have a poll
You can have
or
polls and
kind of it. You can use it as a quiz if you want.
it's good for an initial brainstorm. Like, what do you think about this thing? And then they can all type in their answer, and it creates a word cloud based on like the most popular answers.
Yep.
And it is nice and quick.
Yes.
Like, code on the board quickly. There's the question. Go for it. It is very nice for like a quick entry or exit ticket.
Yeah.
The one thing I find that's hard about that is you can only use a maximum of 3 slides, I think, if you don't have a paid account.
Yeah.
So that's why it's good as like an entry or exit ticket, and I do really like it, and it's really nice and clean, and I don't know,
Yes.
just like it is really good. Wayground is just more set up for teachers, and it gives really good data. And my school has like a school subscription, so you know I can do lots of things with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved Mentimeter. But I think what works for me, and I'm going to say the I word again because I'm at an inquiry school.
Ooh.
We love using thinking routines. And I was actually having a conversation with a colleague today in our year 2 collaboration meeting.
So much that has happened for us today.
How serendipitous. What a great word, serendipitous. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I need to use a different thinking routine. And if you don't know what a thinking routine is, scroll back to the very beginning of our feed because somewhere there's a thinking routines episode.
There definitely is.
But to credit where credit is due, Project Zero at Harvard, fantastic. Look up. If you just Google Project Zero thinking routines, first link, so good. And I was talking with a colleague and I was saying, well, I was thinking that my students are going to get bored of the same couple of thinking routines used every lesson. However, what my colleague pointed out is that they are routines. How can something become a routine if you don't use it often? And the whole point of a thinking routine is to reduce the cognitive load so the students aren't worried about how they're presenting information so that you can gauge whether they've understood something. They're focused on learning the content.
Yeah. I think I am actually guilty of misusing thinking routines in this way. Like, I love thinking routines too. I don't depend on them probably as much as you do because of just the nature of my school. But I think I use them as a learning activity or a hook kind of activity sporadically, rather than actually, this is a really helpful routine in this subject because XYZ. Let me actually teach you how to use this and use it as like a regular brainstorming tool or as a regular evaluation tool.
Yes. And one of the reasons I wanted to move from kindergarten to year 2 was to get into some deeper thinking. And the plethora, the myriad, the menagerie of thinking routines I've been able to use in the 5 weeks that we've been at school this year is so rewarding. For example, we are looking at place value today. And we will go into much greater detail about this in our mini episodes, but I thought I'd just drop a little nugget in here. We've used claim support question.
Oh, I love that one actually.
Which was great. We've used 2 routines for place value. Claim support question is 1. I put 23 and 32 on the board and said, are these the same number? And you would be surprised to learn that like a quarter of my class said, yep.
Right.
And I was like, no, by year 2, you should know that's not true.
Yeah.
So their claim was either these are the same number or they're not.
Yeah.
The support was, here are some MAB blocks, like grab your 10s rods and your 1s cubes and stuff, make the numbers prove to me that what you've said is true or not. And then the question, do you have any other questions? The claim and support was probably the biggest bit. The question bit, not so much, because this wasn't really a time for exploring ideas. This was a black and white, there is a true answer here.
Yeah.
However, the thinking routine still worked really well, even though there was something specific I wanted them to get at. The other one was called parts, purposes, complexities.
I've also used it.
Yes. We've used this twice now, and we used it today for place value, where we looked at a 2-digit number, I think it was 47, and we said, well, what are the parts of 47? The digits 4 and 7. purposes. What does the digit 4 represent in 47? It represents 4 tens or 40. What does the 7 represent? 7 ones or 7. Now, the complexities, I didn't quite understand what this was for. But basically, the idea was to prompt students to consider, okay, if the digit 4 was in a different spot in this number, would the number change? Yes, it would, children. Yes, it would. So I'm trying to get them to the understanding, or even the generalization, if you will, that the order of digits in a number matters.
Yeah.
I literally wrote that on the board today. The order of the digits in a number matters, and that's what place value is, basically. And so now that I've taught my students those 2 thinking routines, claim, support, question, and parts, purposes, complexities, what I need to do now to reduce their cognitive load as students is to use those thinking routines more and more often across disciplines, across KLAs. So they go, oh, I know exactly what claim, support, question is for. Now I can use it to explore this picture book that we're looking at in English. And it provides predictability for them, provides predictability for me. I've taught this routine before. I'm comfortable with it. They're comfortable with it. My cognitive load has been reduced before the lesson because I go, in my lesson planner, I just go, parts, purposes, complexities. And I maybe reference, because my plan is just for me. And just maybe reference the text to this for if it's for English, for example. And that's a lesson. And also, sorry, I'm monologuing here, but something else helpful that I found is that I feel like I need to be quote unquote productive in a lesson, but the lesson isn't about me, it's about the students. So if for a whole lesson you do one activity, that's okay. Spending a whole lesson on one thinking routine could, depending on your context, be perfectly appropriate. And I've noticed that because when we do professional development at my school, often the head of teaching and learning will take us through, she takes us through model lessons, and we learn about inquiry learning through inquiry learning. And she only has a couple of thinking routines, and maybe a cross comparison chart like we did today. Her lesson's actually quite simple, but the thinking we're doing is very rich.
Yeah.
And I remember so much more from those PD sessions than I have from any other PD session I've ever done. So, I mean, keep it simple, stupid, KSS. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that will work if the content that you're dealing with is rich and your students are capable of that deeper thinking. You might need to scaffold it a bit more at the start. But yeah, I think I want my lesson plans to look beautiful and I want students to be running around doing stuff all the time. But sometimes giving them time in the lesson to just think and collaborate if that's appropriate, work independently if that's appropriate, is beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. I actually am wondering, just as you're saying that, I remember in one of my first few months of being a teacher, my sort of head of teaching and learning equivalent suggested that I read this book about explicit direct instruction. And that had a very specific outline of what every lesson should look like. You start with a assessment of what do they already know, and then you move into your explicit explanation of something, and then you might look at concrete examples, and then you might do a I do, we do, you do, and then they have an opportunity for independent practice, and then you sort of do a plenary thing at the end. And it was there's so many different components, and it kind of felt like that's a lot to squish into 48 minutes or however long I had there.
Yeah.
They were really weird lesson times at that school. I mean, but even it would be a lot to fit into 60 minutes that I have now. And, I think over time I came to realize that even if I was using an explicit instruction model, you don't have to fit all the components of that into a single lesson slot. It might be appropriate to do the activate prior knowledge and explicit instruction part in one lesson, and then in the subsequent lesson do independent practice and kind of retrieval or exit tickety revisiony type stuff. It's been a long time since I've used that exact model, so apologies if the language isn't quite right. But you know what I'm sort of meaning. And yeah, I just think that's actually so true. Like depending on kind of what maybe approach your school takes, or they might not have a clear sort of directive on what approach to take. Like my school describes what we do as, we like to use best practice. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are aligning ourselves totally in one camp of explicit or inquiry. Like there are times when, I guess, approaches from both are appropriate for what you're doing and might be able to be used to draw out deeper thinking. But there's also times when explicit direction and explicit instruction of certain things are necessary. Like, I don't know what place value is. That might be necessary.
Yeah.
But there are important things to draw from both. And I just think, yeah, I just really like what you've said about routines. Sometimes are, we don't need to busy ourselves through a lesson to feel productive. I really like that. I think, for example, today what I did with my year 12s and having them work through some sort of independent research while I had a chance to meet with them all, that was really productive. Even though there wasn't like here's a great hook to get you all excited, and here's this, and here's this, and here's my little mid-lesson assessment to see if you're gathering the information, and here's this, like we just don't have those very uni-ish fancy plans every lesson. And sometimes they're actually more disruptive than helpful for learning. Like if you're constantly switching. I mean, we think about task switching and distractions and all the other things. Like every time you have a transition, like that's time.
Yeah.
If you're transitioning from we're watching a video to now we're doing this to now we're doing this to now we're doing this to now we're doing this, like that's time in your lesson that is taken away from students just engaging in like deep thinking about something.
Yeah, I think pretty much most of my good lessons have been, I've picked a thinking routine that really specifically targets the the goal of what I want students to do. Like the parts, purposes, complexities, that was great for all the claim support question, great for place value. We did a connect extend challenge when we were thinking about comparing to picture books that we'd read. That was great. And I inherited from the teacher who previously in my classroom, who's now on maternity leave. She had all these huge rolls of butcher's paper, like wrapping paper, just huge roll, like many rolls, so many. And so already this year I've been able to just roll it out like a carpet and get all the kids to write. Like I'm thinking of, I deliberately used this for Connect Extend Challenge. I split the big long roll into 3 bits, wrote Connect in one color, Extend in one color, Challenge in a different color. And my students were actually able, some of them were able to do it out of order depending on where the space was, because I didn't really think about, I was actually thinking on the fly. I was like, I don't like what I've planned. I'm just going to change it, which is so unlike me. So there were some bottlenecks, but we managed, and they were all able to write or draw something for each category of the thinking routine. And that was specific to the comparison of these 2 texts. But that took most of the lesson. And what I've also found, potentially because my leader of teaching and learning is teaching adults when she does PD with us, she doesn't spend 20 minutes going around the classroom making sure every group shares their ideas. Sometimes that's appropriate, but not always. Sometimes it might be enough that maybe students do a little bit of a gallery walk. Love a gallery walk.
Yes.
Love a gallery walk. And, because I'm still teaching infants, like that's technically what the age group is called. I do a bit of role play and go, we're going to pretend we're really snobby and we're going to walk around and have a look at everyone's stuff and blah, blah, blah. Mostly so they don't touch all the paper and play with pencils and things. But yeah, they're like, what I observed when I first started teaching at my current school was that it seemed like a lot of my effort as a teacher was going to be before the lesson, and most of the thinking would be done by the students in the lesson. And I found that the lessons that I think have gone the best and have been most inquiry based kind of have done that. Like, that's not a hard and fast rule, but I find that if I've really thought about, what thinking routine am I going to use, and are the like sources or case studies or, books, numbers, whatever that I've chosen, are they quality? If I've done all of that beforehand, then the students, I've scaffolded their thinking enough that they can do some really good thinking and some good work. And I try and give them opportunities for individual, small group, whole class collaboration, that kind of thing. But my job is to facilitate that. It's not my job to perform, which, oh my goodness, so many nuggets. I'm not there to perform. I'm there to facilitate learning. And sometimes things will look like Miss Keen's going to talk for a bit now and you're going to listen. But, a good thinking routine, honestly, if you've got a good thinking routine, if you've got my neighbor, my classroom neighbor, who is also our grade leader, is fantastic. And she said at the beginning of the year, because we were having some delayed deliveries of resources, she said, if I've got pencils and paper, I can teach. And I was like, okay, because I can't. But now I'm feeling a little bit more confident that I've got this toolbox that's literally called the Project Zero toolbox of thinking routines.
It is.
Got a toolbox of thinking routines that sometimes don't even require paper.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I just do it as a whole class. Sometimes I think, great, we're going to do it all together. You're going to do it, collaboratively and write down stuff. Pencil and paper. That's all you need.
Yeah.
Look, that was a massive ramble. And if you can decipher that, dear listener, I am very proud of you. But that's honestly a combination of all the wisdom I've received from my colleagues and my professional learning over the last couple of years. And I'm reminding myself as we record this to keep it simple.
Yeah.
And, planning for tomorrow, because let's be real, I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
I'll be keeping that in mind.
Yeah. I really, I'm feeling challenged to pick a few routines, teach them well, and be able to rely on them repeatedly. I think, like I said at the start, I'm a bit of a chronic reinvent the wheeler. But I also love thinking routines and like what they do and what they help you to achieve. And so I think, and even if it's not exactly thinking routines, like even like the sentence stems that I had for my
sentence stems.
Yes, for my start of the lesson routine that I'm trialing with year 7 and 8. Like if you can have some routine that your lesson planning can kind of like fall back on so that you can at least, like, if you sort of pre-pick those things in advance, or which routines you work well with, or which ones you like, or which ones will really work well with your class and your dynamic and your subject and all of those things, you can still, I guess, moderately reinvent the wheel in a way that suits your teacher personality, your teaching style, your class dynamic, without like having to recreate resources. I actually think that's where a lot of people get stuck in relation to reinventing the wheel. Reinventing the wheel is usually associated with I'm redesigning a worksheet, or I'm redesigning a set of slides, or I'm redesigning a resource to be able to teach this well. I guess the beauty of thinking routines or sentence stems or some sort of like regular approaches that you use, regardless of what they are, whether it's Wayground, whether it's Menti, whatever the tool is, finding a few that you like and that work with your class allow you to reinvent the wheel in a way that is like perhaps not time consuming, because you're not coming up with brand new resources and brand new approaches to teaching for every lesson. I sometimes will, whenever I want to teach a topic that I'm kind of like, okay, I don't have any resources that I've made on this syllabus point or whatever. There's this set of slides that someone else has made. I really don't want to teach from a slide deck because I really hate doing that. But how long does it take me to chuck it into Wayground it uses AI to like create relevant questions, which, you know, sometimes I use and sometimes I make my own, but it doesn't take me that long to take an existing resource and tweak it to my style. But, you know, and I just have to let go of the fact that maybe it's not super aesthetically pleasing, and that's okay.
What I love about thinking routines on a similar vein is that I can do them verbally and just discuss them with students. I can get them to write stuff if I want to. Most of the time, I'm making 3 columns on a whiteboard and writing some headings.
Yeah.
And then scribing their responses.
Or you can make a really nice looking worksheet on Canva that also just has the 3 columns. Like, if you want it to look nice and if you want it to be like planned and organized and structured and scaffolded, especially if you're teaching it for the first time. If the routine is new to your class, having a worksheet might be helpful, but the worksheet is literally your 3 columns or the prompt questions at the top or whatever it is that is the thinking routine. And then over time, as they become familiar with that routine, it's like, hey, draw a quick claim support question in your book and let's roll with this.
Literally.
And I really wanted to say, just in case anyone's listening to this description of the claim support question routine for the first time ever, you said you used it in maths today, which has like blown my mind, because I have used claim support question before as like kind of like a writing structure for when I'm asking students to understand the difference between like different directive verbs. So, you know, identify, describe, explain, evaluate, those sorts of verbs. And explain in particular is one that's sometimes hard for students because it really requires a cause and effect type response. And a lot of the time they'll just describe in a lot of detail rather than show the cause of something. It's very easy to describe the effect of something and a little bit harder for them to think about what's causing that effect. So I've used claim support question in a writing context before where it's like, okay, what's your claim? This thing happens. What's your support for that? And then, you know, what can we question or prompt ourselves? Often the question we ask ourselves when we're writing and explain is, yeah, but why?
Yeah.
You know, if I can get to the end of your paragraph and still ask the question, but why, then you haven't really explained, you've just described a lot of stuff. You know, my students might be describing influences on designers, for example, is something that we've been looking at lately. And they might describe a whole bunch of the influences. But if the question is, you know, explain how certain external factors have influenced your designer's work, it's all well and good to claim that they've been influenced by things and to describe all those influences. But if I get to the end of your paragraph and ask, yeah, but why did those things matter, or what impact did those things have, then they haven't really gotten to that next level of thinking in that cause and effect relationship. And so that's the question I use in claim support question is the but why or but how.
Yep.
So yeah, it's just an interesting example of how I would never have thought maybe that framework or that routine could be used in like a number sense, but that makes perfect sense how you explained it worked before. It's just really cool how versatile they are.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I think it's worth saying that like one of the things that I actually love about being a teacher is like the creative license that you get. Someone has said to me before, like, you know, being a teacher is hard. Like, what keeps you being a teacher? And my answer was, you know, I always like having a challenge. I like doing new things. Some people will just like to find their groove, and once they've found it, they just like to do the same thing over and over again. And some people, like myself, who are kind of the chronic let's reinvent the wheel people, sometimes we do it because we actually like the challenge of trying something new and creative and seeing whether it works, or was it better, or was it worse, and will I do it that way next time, and what would I try again? And I just think it's important to hang on to that creativity if that's something that spurs you on. We're talking about this from the perspective of like making sure that you've got realistic expectations of yourself and what's sustainable. You know, we don't have time in our days or our weeks to spend 4 hours on each lesson that we need to deliver, planning it. That's okay. But sometimes if I'm really, really keen to try teaching a topic or a point a different way to what I've done before, sometimes it might take me 3 hours to come up with a new lesson and a new way to teach that particular thing. That doesn't mean I'm spending 3 hours planning all of my lessons for that day, every day that week. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I just think it's okay to give yourself creative license to do things. We're not saying don't ever reinvent the wheel, but that there's not, that we really should be looking for things that we can do, that we enjoy, that help make our lesson planning easier, that still align with, okay, what resources already exist? What can I use to my advantage? And what can I use that suits my personality and my students?
If you're still with us, thank you so much for listening. As you can tell, we have quite strong opinions about all of this because we have strong opinions about teaching. And that was our full-length episode for this month, but we have 3 mini episodes coming up. We're going to go into some more detail about some, more specific repeatable lesson structures, beyond thinking routines, but also including them because they're awesome. Planning when you're especially time poor, but I feel like I'm always time poor.
Yeah.
And knowing when to change things versus when to keep them consistent.
Yeah.
And that's part of what my principal would call the art of teaching, which is unfortunately something that you build with experience and time. But, we're going to have a crack at our combined 8 years of experience.
Ooh.
And have a look at how do you know when it's appropriate to, spice it up a bit. Knowing when to change versus when to keep it consistent is potentially quite challenging, but very helpful.
Yeah.
And so stay tuned for those minis. You can find us on all the social medias. We are at Teaching Together the podcast. We would love to create a community of shared wisdom and experience and knowledge. So reach out and we will reach back and give you a high five or a handshake or a hug, depending on what you select. I'm just trying to make Sierra laugh now. And we'll catch you next time. Bye.